Hi, how's everyone out there doing? This is Amy Hamilton, author of The Project Manager, Life is a Project, and The Consummate Communicator, Character Traits of True Professionals. Today, we are online right now with David Arrowsmith. This is part of 24 Authors in 12 Hours January edition. And the really great thing is this is a virtual book festival, and it is an international book festival. So when people are like, oh, COVID has limited us so much, it's also opened up the world so much. I am super excited to have David here from the UK. And David, what time is it where you're at?
It is 5:30. Yeah, it's 5:30 in the evening. It's been a long day here in London in lockdown. It's been raining all day. So our toddler, who's watching cartoons now downstairs with my wife, has been bouncing off the walls today. So yeah, it's slightly the end of what's been a long day for a dad of a young child. So forgive the bags under the eyes. Yeah, it's 5:30 here, and it's around lunchtime with you, I think.
Yes, it is around lunchtime, and it's a really fun day in America right now. It is our inauguration day, and some people were like, "Oh, are you really going to have this broadcast?" And I said, "Absolutely. People need alternatives," and I've received so much positive feedback. And as a matter of fact, I just wanted just to screen so that when we have comments, we can go ahead and listen to those. And it's just really fantastic to have all these different authors from different places. It's a multi-genre experience. And one of the things that just struck me about your book, David, is I said, here's this guy. He's over there across the Atlantic Ocean. And what's he writing about? America.
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, it was an interesting decision, I guess, especially the first thing that I'd written and the first thing that I decided to publish. And I've had some nice but interesting comments about that. I had one reader who pointed out very much that it's an outsider's view of the American West, I suppose, and he drew some parallels to Paris, Texas, the film by Wim Wenders. And I also had in my mind when I was visualizing some of the book. The film Hell or High Water, which is also directed by a Brit. So yes, and some of the language is sort of English spelling, British English rather than American English. So I guess there's that slight different tone there. But yeah, I guess the book kind of chose me rather than me choosing the book. Maybe in hindsight, I could have written something typically British or typically, London centric. But this was the story that came to me that inspired me to kind of start writing properly. Yeah, I think one thing I've discovered from doing it and now thinking about what else I want to write is that I think part of the reason I wrote this is because this trip that I went on with my wife that inspired the book, that came back to me in a dream nearly a year later and was something I had to just start writing. That was because it was a journey. It was a place that I'd been to that I was so clearly so inspired by without even realizing it at the time. And as I've started to write more and more now, I think that's something that I really love about writing. And, equally about talking to you now and about being part of this community of authors and the writing community and, in the digital age. Is that for me, writing is a kind of form of travel therapy, really. And especially in lockdown, I've really found that, that a lot of the ideas that I want to write, I want to conjure up these places that I've been to, that I want to travel back to, a different place, a different time, and to hopefully give that back to the reader, that they can travel with me, whether it's to Nevada and Utah, as in Nevada Noir, or whether it's to some of the other places that I'm writing about and planning on writing about.
So you just bring up so many great points there, David. And one of the things about this being a virtual book festival is this gives people a chance to escape. I mean, so often when we look at the world today, there's a lot of negativity. There's a lot of stuff out there that can be very stressful. And the nice thing about a book is it gives us the opportunity to say, you know what, I'm just going to take away from this world for a while. I'm going to go into this book. And yours is really nice because it's a series of, and correct me if I'm wrong, 3 short stories, correct?
That's right.
And the nice thing is they're manageable. So for some people, and I'm going to speak more to the reading audience right now, I mean, people say, oh my gosh, I can't believe you write books. I don't even read books. And I think a short story is something that anybody can tackle because you can just take it in a little digestible means. You don't have to just eat the whole elephant. It's not like, you're reading Tolstoy, right? You can take your book and manage it. So I really like that you did that. And then I found it interesting. You've shared a lot already. So for some of my questions about, how long were you in Nevada? And I thought maybe you'd studied abroad, but it sounds like it was a vacation. So how did you get so much insight into Nevada from your short trip, or did you end up doing a lot of additional research?
I have to admit, I'm not a big one for crazy levels of research, and I know a lot of writers are, whether they've been to a place or not. I think this, because it was so vivid, the images that came into my mind that started the whole process, I just sort of transposed and transliterated those and just literally got them down onto my phone that morning, in the shower and on the way to work. The whole thing was just playing out in my head like a cinefilm, and I was just writing it down. And all of that literally did come. I mean, it's a fictional, scene and a fictional place and location, but as it came to me, I knew that it was inspired by and came from those vistas that we saw and those places that we drove through. But you're right. I mean, it's not that I was immersed in Nevada and Nevadan culture for weeks or months, or that I lived there. We literally flew to Las Vegas. We spent, I think, 4 nights staying in Las Vegas, but mainly spending the days traveling out into the countryside. And the third story in the trilogy is very much set in my imagination in the location of Zion National Park, which is in Utah, which is quite a drive from Las Vegas, but we did it in a day just to go and have a hike somewhere else. And then obviously we were in Las Vegas, which is the setting really for the second story. And the first story is kind of a fictional, imagined place. The wilderness that it starts in, I sort of assumed might exist there in my mind. It was just part of the sort of endless scrubland that extends out of the city, and likewise the suburbs, I guess, was just sort of something that I plucked out and sort of fictionalized. But yeah, again, I've had really nice feedback, and I've had feedback from natives of Nevada who have actually said, "Wow, you really bring this place to life, and I've lived here all my life, and I recognize the place that you're describing." And that for me was such a validation, really, that this place I'd only been to for a few days, and then a year later had written about, several thousand miles away, that I was able to make people feel that it was real, and that they were inhabiting that real world, meant a lot to me. So yeah, that was really great, and that's something I really like to do, is put my readers in a place and make them really experience every aspect of it.
One thing that I really thought is terrific, David, is because you do have that outsider's view, and I'm projecting a bit, and just so you know, I went to University of Liverpool, and so I have some perspective there. Is when you do look at the UK, it's very, very dense, and there's not like a whole lot of, like, even the countryside is very, very like congested. And then when you look at Nevada, I mean, it is vast. And so kind of my perspective is how you were able to capture that, because you're so not used to it, as opposed to when somebody sees it every day, they don't pick up those nuances. Do you feel that that's part of the process that you went through?
I think so. I mean, I think that's part of why it sort of imprinted itself on my subconscious and my sort of creative mind, is, that's something, my wife and I have loved to do over the last few years, is go to different places, and places that are different from where we live and where we grew up separately, and experience, get out into the wild and the wilderness, and feel nature around you, and get away from people in the urban environment. And so I think that's why I felt that pull kind of so strongly and so creatively. And I look back at the pictures that we took, and they still take my breath away. And it's so different, and it's so alien to someone who grew up in London, who lives in London, who has lived in Hong Kong and in Manchester, big, busy cities. And so those environments, I think they just really appealed to me. And I think as well, I've kind of always yearned for a bit of travel and exoticism, and I kind of grew up and still do watch westerns, have an affection for the Wild West, or that kind of that American ideal of self-determination, and those stories about finding yourself kind of in the frontier, and I think all of that sort of pop culture of the Western, the spaghetti Western, even just the kind of the atmospheres created by the music of Bob Dylan and Neil Young and artists like that. I think all of that just, again, it's that outsider's view, that romanticization of both the old Wild West and kind of the current West of America. I think this book is kind of my homage to the romanticization of those places, and sort of in a way quite deliberate. Like I know that it's not necessarily really like that, but I'm pulling at those emotional threads of kind of how it makes me feel about those places, that they're beautiful and wild and desolate, and that it's a kind of distillation of nature and life and humanity there. Everything is very stark, and it's life and death, and it's light and shade, and it's hot and cold, and it's city like Vegas, and it's wilderness. And so I think that really appealed to me and kind of felt quite noir to me, that sense of light and shade. And then the morality of the characters is very much grey. It's kind of in the middle. They are that spectrum of humanity where we're tempted by things, and we have good impulses and bad impulses, and this being a sort of noir style trilogy of stories, that they're more tending towards the bad impulses, make good dramatic kind of crime fiction. But yeah, it was an amazing place, and both Nevada and Utah and the parts of California that we went through, were stunningly beautiful, and like I say, obviously really had a massive impact on me that I could never have predicted at the time.
Now, I think it's a really interesting when you travel to other places, your perspective and how you're taking all of your experiences and then putting it into another place. And one of the things that you said is about how you romanticized it, and I think it's nice because so often when we do live in a place, it just becomes that very gray world, not in a positive, but in a very just kind of, we're just seeing it all like just, not as an outsider would. And so it's, I think, great that people living in Nevada and Utah and California have reached out to you and said, hey, this is really evocative. It makes me look at my environment around me differently. And I live in Arlington, Virginia, which is right outside of DC. And I'm fortunate enough to be able to go into the district on a regular basis. And I try to remind myself, like, I live in a postcard. Like, there's so many people. And having been to London several times, I love London. And I think you take some of it for granted. You're like, oh, there's Big Ben again. Like it's just a landmark. And the first time though, you're like, oh my gosh, it's like Big Ben, it's the London Bridge. I mean, you just get like super excited. And I know it's technically the Tower Bridge and the London Bridge and that whole story. But
right. I think you're right, and I think it is nice that by writing about somewhere else, even the people who live there feel kind of transported by reading it, which is great, which is what, that is kind of what I aim for with my writing. Is it's a bit more kind of poetic, it's a bit more evocative. I don't shy away from the descriptive. A lot of the style and the fashion these days is to be very pared down, very minimalist in your prose. And I guess mine is a bit more flowery, a bit more poetic. But that was kind of a conscious decision. And that's kind of, I love language, and I love the capability and capacity for language to describe things, and the abundance of word choices that we have with the English language, where there are 1,000 words for anything really that you want to describe, or 1,000 ways that you could describe it, with metaphor and with simile, or with just vivid description. And so as part of my sort of vision of being able to physically transport people to the places that I write about, I kind of consciously chose to write in that style. And you know, like I say, it's not necessarily in fashion with the, you know, the kind of page turners of the day, but again, the feedback's been really, really positive about both the evocative nature of the language, but also hopefully my ability to marry that with kind of a pacey plot and characters that you can get into and care about, and kind of all the things that make something hopefully a kind of page turning read that will keep people hooked. And like you say, you know, some people have kind of devoured it all in one go because it's not a huge tome, it's not a weighty book, but equally some people have come back to me and said, you know, I'm not a reader, or I haven't really read much in ages, and you know, I love this because it's kind of snackable, because you can do a bit at a time, one story at a time, or read it all in one go. It's not a big commitment. You know, we're all busy, we're all stressed. Sometimes you know, you look at that 600, 700, 800 page, you know, book by your bedside table or on your Kindle, and you just think, oh, you know, kind of want to be asleep in half an hour. Do I really want to crack on with that? So I think it feels like quite an interesting niche. It was not deliberate. It was just that those were the stories as they came, and I thought that works. And you know, it's not, you know, something that commercially is you know, is very common to have something of that length. But I just thought that those are those stories. That's how they work. And yeah, again, the feedback's been really, really positive about that. So yeah, I think I'm really happy with it, and it's been great that it's opened up this whole world of talking to people like you.
And David, I just put the link to your book in the chat for anybody who wants to check out Nevada Noir Trilogy. You can get it on Amazon.com. And for our audience as well, my 2 books, The Consummate Communicator, Character Traits of True Professionals, and The Project Manager, Life as a Project, both available, download free for Kindle all day. David, I love your language. And you said earlier, like, how you just love the use of the English language, and that you felt like, you know, you didn't want to just go with the trend. You wanted it to be unique. And I think that that's a bold thing. And did you have people who told you, oh, maybe you shouldn't go in this direction? Or were you just like, I'm committed and this is what I'm going to do?
I didn't have people who told me not to do it, mainly because I didn't really have anyone around me in relation to it at all. You know, I wrote it myself over the period of a few years. The first story came, you know, a year after the trip, which was, I think I wrote the first story in 2017, and then the second story a few months later. And then I got busy with work, and it took a year or more before I wrote the third story. And then with lockdown, in fact, a bit before lockdown, I again was less busy with work, and I started playing around with it, what had now become a trilogy, and was never envisaged that it would be that when I wrote the first story, but gradually evolved. And I kind of quickly realized that because it's not a novel, and because I'm a first-time author, it's not massively marketable as it is. It's really hard I think for publishers and for agents to kind of understand what to do with something like that. And so having kind of sounded out a couple of people, you know, kind of tangentially in the profession, I work in television, I know kind of people within that publishing world, they were very supportive of the quality of the work. But I could see that there was really going to be this problem with, it's not a novel. I can't submit this, you know, to a publisher or an agent, because they wouldn't want to publish it as it is. And so in the end, I just decided to do it myself. So I kind of bypassed that whole process. And being someone who has a degree in English literature and a master's in script writing, and coming up for 20 years experience kind of writing as part of my day job, writing television proposals and pitches and things like that, I sort of felt relatively qualified to kind of sense check it, quality check it, edit, and kind of do all of that myself. So a lot of those, I guess, checks and balances, for better or worse, to the creative process weren't there. You know, often you'll have writers, they'll write something, they'll have alpha readers, beta readers, advanced reading copies, they'll hire an editor, they might well have a literary agent, they might have a publisher, and it will pass through all of those hands and get all kinds of feedback, again, you know, for better or worse, and it will evolve and change. And perhaps if I'd gone through that, this would have been better, it would have been worse, it would have been longer, it would have never seen the light of day. But I kind of just kind of backed myself, really, and I just thought this is how I would do it. And what I wanted to do was put something I had written out into the world just to get the feedback, and I knew that I wasn't, unfortunately, because of the length of it, I was never going to get the feedback professionally from someone, because they would just say, as some of them did, so get in touch when you've got something longer. We'd be interested to hear from you when you've written a novel. And I kind of, because I've got a day job, I kind of didn't want to jump into kind of arrogantly assuming that someone would want to read my novel if I started to write it. And so I thought, I'll publish this, and if I can get a few people to read it and tell me that they like it, then that might give me the kind of wind in my sails. And then that's exactly what's happened, and it's had feedback from all over the world, and far beyond kind of friends and family and professional acquaintances, and the kind of feedback that's just made me go, I can write. There are people out there who would like to hear more from me. There are people who've said to me, when are you writing something else, a novel, something else I can read by you? And so as a result of that, it's done exactly what I wanted it to do, which is give me the confidence to now kind of carry on, springboard on to write more, which I'm doing. And I've got kind of 3 or 4 projects on the go now. It's going to be a busy year for my writing, I think, and we'll see come the sort of latter end of the year what route those might take to market or to the audience, depending on how they go and how the kind of initial feedback on those is. But yeah, it was there wasn't really anyone to tell me it was a bad idea, which as I said, is for better or worse.
No, that's a really interesting journey, and I think that's one of the great things about these interviews is it's really finding about the author's journey. Everyone has a different story. One of our earlier speakers, Michael Faber, his book is really about writing the story of you. We've had some other novelists. And each person has to decide what's right. And you bring up a point too that publishers are very prescriptive in how things need to be done, and print on demand now has changed everything. And when I first started looking at publishing, one of my mentors said, "Why would you go through a publisher anymore?" And I'm like, "Well, and she's like, that's done. She's like, just go and write your books and get them out there. And unless you're getting a book like where you're like a big name person and things like that, a lot of people, because then now you really own the material and you can do those changes. And in no way am I saying publishers are bad. I'm just saying, the world's changed. I mean, before independent writing and stuff, it wasn't, it was very different, but now it's really opened up. And that's where this 24 authors, I mean, the fact that we have 24 authors from around the world who are, wanting to come forward and talk about their books. I mean, how amazing.
It's great. And it's something, again, I kind of blundered into all of this purely on kind of artistic inspiration rather than any kind of master plan or anything. And it's one of the things I've kind of learned, on the hoof, on the way, is so much about print on demand, being an indie author, the differences between the different routes, but also the whole community out there, the quality of some of the other writers. It's such a supportive community. People are fantastically supportive. I've never kind of really experienced anything like it, to be honest. I've as a result of this, I've started reading more and more books by indie authors, and I've read some really great stuff already. I'm very early on in that journey and in my journey, and in no way would I rule out, going down a traditional route with some of my future works or all of my future works, if that's ever a possibility. But equally, like you say, I think it's now a whole different option that didn't exist before, and it's not about vanity publishing and paying thousands and thousands of pounds, and getting someone to physically print out hundreds of copies of your paperback that sit at home and no one reads it. It's a way to get your voice out, and as a result of that, there's a lot of people doing it, and there's a lot of noise, and there's not a lot of quality control. And so you have to find your niche, and you have to find your way of getting people to come to you. But I do think there is quality out there, and it's a bit, you have to panhandle a bit. There's a bit of sifting to find that gold. But I think, that there really is out there, and there are traditional authors who started out on that route and were discovered that way as well. So I think it really has changed, and it's something I'm kind of learning to appreciate more and more. Really, for me, it was kind of impatience, I think, and also a realization that, like I say, this particular thing that I'd written just was not something, especially for a first-time author, that commercially was just going to make a lot of sense. Once you involve other people and margins start getting squeezed, and how do you publicize it? How do you get your revenue back if you can't charge big bucks, for a big, heavy new release? It becomes really hard. And so this was just a way to bypass all of that. And I think a lot of other creative people have found the same thing and gone the same way.
Well, David, we are coming up to the end of our segment. I really want to thank you, and hopefully you can look through what some of the other authors are presenting today and find some great reads. And good luck to you, your wife, and your toddler in lockdown, because I'm sure that it's getting close to bedtime there.
Yes, it is. Thank you. Thank you. Very quickly, can I shout out a competition? Because I did promise people that
absolutely
have a chance to win an ebook copy of Nevada Noir. So all you have to do, follow me on social media. My Facebook and Instagram are David Arrowsmith author, and my Twitter is Mr. Writerman79. And if you can track me down, David Arrowsmith, the author of Nevada Noir, follow me and just leave a comment on
Mr. Writerman79.
Mr. Writerman79 is Twitter, and David Arrowsmith author is my Facebook author page, and also my Instagram handle. And if you follow me and leave a comment on any of my posts saying you watched this 24 Authors in 12 Hours interview, I will enter you into a draw to win a code for a free copy of the ebook. And I'm going to keep that competition open for a week so that people have a chance. I think there might be a chance to view this again after this live broadcast. So I wanted to give people a chance to enter. So up till the 27th of January, follow me, comment on one of my posts about this broadcast, and say that you want to be entered into the draw, and you could win an ebook copy of Nevada Noir. And if you don't win, or you're impatient, it's available now, ebook or paperback, via Amazon all around the world.
Great. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. Take care, Amy. Good luck with the rest of it.
Thank you.